Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet.
This review is part 2 of the all-new tooling 71 Boss 351 Mustang kit from Revell, number 14512. Now, the previous part 1 covered the body, and there's a link in the description for you to see that if you missed it. But we're going to continue on and show you the rest of the construction. There'll be a lot of tips along the way in order to enhance your model. And there's a lot of things to like about this kit. It's really a step up for Revell, and I think you will enjoy it too. Construction begins by giving the larger parts a nice warm bath and some dial type soap, and rinsing and drying them. And then we're going to give them some base colors. In this case, these parts will be painted semi-gloss black, and that's a Krylon's satin black finish. Now, these parts are going to be painted flat white, and then later on they'll be given a coat of satin for sheen. But first, we're going to have to, of course, remove them carefully from the trees. And we'll start with the seats because they're going to need some seam filling. So we'll get those out and we'll start to put those together. Now, as you can see, they're just fronts and backs. There's nothing special to it, but we'll have to glue those together, and then we'll start addressing that seam. So we used a little bit of thin liquid cement to go ahead and assemble the seat fronts and backs. And you see here they're put together. They also have a slight, gap. I mean, you can see it. It's noticeable. And in some places, of course, the glue has squeezed out, and that will help. But then we're going to take a file. This is a diamond file. And we're going to go ahead and file that seam off and get it down to the plastic, but not too far, because you don't want to take off much of the detail of the contour of the seat. And then we're going to take and use some this is a sanding pad, a 320 grit, and we're going to smooth that seam out. So go ahead, and when you have parts like this, it's important to finish it off so that you can't see any defect, or even better, feel it with your fingernail. Otherwise, it'll show up after paint. So we're going to clean this up as best we can, and then we'll add some putty to the seam to further finish it off so that it looks really nice when it's in the vehicle. As you see here, some of the other pieces have been painted in silver tones and steel tones. The mufflers were aluminum, and there's some steel or silver tones on some of the other base pieces here, the wheel backs and the exhaust pipes, the hinges, etc. So let those set and dry. And now we'll locate these pieces for the basic engine block, and we'll get started constructing that. It's got just your main portions of the engine block, and also you see here an air cleaner. That's going to be an integral part later on. But we're going to add some paint to these after we get them put together. Now, a close examination of the air cleaner cover reveals some excellent detail. It looks like it's not molded properly, but in fact it is a perfect representative of the actual air cleaner. You see the non-concentric rings there. That is correct. And there's a lot of other detailing that will go into this piece. There are several decals and a number of paint items there. Well, it would be nice if they could just make these parts in thin air so they weren't connected to anything, but they have attachment points. And so next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on those. You simply use the tools that you see here, files, a hobby knife, a sanding stick, to go ahead and clean up all of those attachment points. Now, the thing is, you don't want to cut the parts off too close to the part, or you may nip some of it and then have to repair that. So you clip off the attachment point, and then you go ahead and finish them off with the various tools that you see here. Now that's a diamond file, and they're pretty handy for heavier stuff. Then you want to use a nice soft sanding. Make sure that you don't take too much off of that. And that's about it. So this is a conventional construction for the motor. You see the block halves are put together here. And now we're going to add the cylinder heads. Just make sure that everything is cleaned up. I always put a number on right or left when I'm assembling parts and taking them off the trees to make sure that I get them back into position in the right location. Sometimes the cylinder heads are not real easy to distinguish right from left if you don't pay real close attention to the instructions. But I'm just using some thin cement here, and then making sure that there's a nice scruff to the gluing surfaces. You see there's no paint on here yet, so it will be a good adhesive bond. You don't need a lot of glue to assemble a motor. You just need to put it thinly in place and make sure that it doesn't squeeze out onto any of the viewing surface that you can see after the parts are assembled. But there's no surprises here. This motor is going together very smoothly. Everything is fitting just like a glove. It's very nicely molded and done, so you won't have any issues with that. Just make sure that everything gets seated all the way in and properly done. So you see here the parts have been painted. The block was assembled and then painted a couple of coats of Ford blue and set to dry. And the rest of the pieces too have been painted. As you can see, most of them are aluminum color. The exhaust headers or pipes they're a steel color. But what we're going to show you too here is you've got some blacks. You've got flat black on the belts and medium glass black on the the pulleys and the fan. Also on the hose, which somehow has a sheen to it. But what we'd like to do now is once those parts are painted and dried, we're going to add a little highlighting in a sense by adding some black wash. What that does is it seeks the recesses, because it's so thin, and it will give depth and definition to parts that need that. Obviously, there are pieces like the ribs on top of your valve covers here that really benefit from a light coat of the black wash. Now, this is something that's pretty easy to apply, and if you don't like it right away, if you don't like your results, you can basically wipe it off and then just start over. Or if it's light in spots, you're going to add some more to it. It really makes a big difference in the appearance of parts because in scale it's hard to see shadows and definitions of tiny little features. So black wash is a nice way to bring that out. This cooler here, I think it's an oil cooler probably. It has some ribbings and a small radiator on the part, and it is a perfect place to add some touches like this to give it real good definition and authenticity. Now we can go ahead and do some more of the primary paint here, and we're going to tackle that transmission. So once you've got a nice good dry surface here, we can use some aluminum paint or some steel color depending on what your transmission is made of, and go ahead and start applying that to the base. And you have two choices. You can either cut it off and paint it separately, glue the part back together. Actually, you could tape it off if you can get the tape in there, or you can just very carefully use a small brush and go ahead and paint that transmission. So make sure your paint is well mixed. Use an electronic mixer for that, and the little stirs that they that they make for your paints really make a difference if you get them thoroughly mixed. So in the interest of time here, we're going to speed things up a little bit, and I'll put the paint on as fast as I can, as you can see, and then you're going to want to examine it to make sure that there aren't any light spots in it, because aluminum has a tendency to look good at first, but then when it dries, it appears to have some missing spots or streaks in it. So go back over it if you see anything like that. Now there's a nice set of decals that go on mostly on the valve covers. So I found it advantageous to go ahead and put those into place on the valve covers before I added them to the motor for just ease of positioning and handling. And then I went ahead and did that. And as always, plenty of warm water. They'll kind of stick where you put them. And I got that information basically by checking internet, photos just to see where they go and verify that. And they make a really nice touch. They did a good job with these decals. They're in register and they make your engine look great. Next, we'll add the exhaust manifolds to the engine. And remember, you have to scrape off that paint. Now, there's a couple knobs you see right there, and they fit right into some notches on the sidewall of the cylinder heads. They'll fit right into position like that. When I was doing a little bit more of the test fitting, I ran into a bit of an issue with the fan pulley system. It seemed that this nub right here at the top, was a little long. Of course, you scrape all the paint off to make sure you get a good adhesion, but when I went to put it into position, I found that the top hole there wasn't deep enough to allow it to mount onto the block properly. It had too much of an angle. So I used a little putty to mock things up, you see, on the crankshaft end, and then I put it into place just to make sure, and it just really didn't seem to fit. Right on my left thumb there, you see that white tab going towards the block. It stops right there. It just doesn't seem to have enough room to go into position properly. So I did what, anybody would do. I kind of pecked at it to see if it was blocked or something. No. So I had to get out another way of making it work. Now you could grind down that post so that it didn't fit so far in, but I wanted a nice positive location on my motor anyway. So I drilled it out a little deeper with a rotary tool there, as you saw. And then I tried it again, a little putty in place to keep it in position, and then to go ahead and test fit again. You never test fit once. You always make a final effort to make sure it's right. And as you can see here, it fits fairly flush, and it is now vertical. We'll move along to some of the other smaller parts now, and it pays, I think, to put your smaller pieces onto the engine first, before you start adding the extremities. We're going to be making sure to remove any paint from areas where we need to glue the parts as well. And test fitting is the watchword. Even with small engine parts, you need to test fit them, make sure they seat fully and are properly positioned in place. Next, we'll continue on by adding the, as you see, the starter here, and it's painted black and silver. And then next, the solenoid for the ignition, or the coil, I should say, goes up on the engine on the passenger side there. I'm using tube glue because you can reset things if you need to. Now we'll add the distributor, and it's black and silver with a silver air advance on there, ignition advance. It goes into position there. And if you want to add detail, get a pre-wired set. But we'll continue with our construction of the engine here. Once again, tube glue works very well. The oil filter is really nice. It's separate, and it has its own decal, so that goes into place along with the carburetor. Nice thing about it is it has a nice rectangular plug, so you can't really put it in wrong. And you see how it's facing there, so just make sure that it's flush and flat and doesn't get twisted or something, so that it looks proper. Next, we're going to add the front end pulley system, and so a little glue on that, and we'll place that into position. A little tube glue to make sure that it goes exactly where it needs to be, and you can adjust it if necessary. That's the thing I like about the slow setting glues. It's a nice looking array here. There's even a decal on the alternator, that red stripe. There's a breather cap on both of the valve covers, and those are painted semi-gloss black. And we're going to use a little bit of tube glue to put those into position. And they're pretty small, so I'm also going to use a little diamond art or bead dotter, as they call them, to place those into position because they're kind of hard to handle. So a little dab of glue there just to retain it into place. It actually fits pretty nicely, might not even need it, but we're going to use that little dotter there to pick it up and install it into the position where it goes on the breather caps. And there's one on each end, and the heads are not easy to mix up, so just note that they do go in opposite ends or opposite forward and backward positions when you put it together. One down and one to go. That makes for a very nice look, especially since these are separated pieces, so the detailing is perfect. You're adding a part that is fully decorated and painted to another part, and once you get these both in place, you'll see it makes for really an attractive engine. And in scale, as it was on the real thing, these cars were in their own sense a work of art. I think you can get a sense of what I mean and appreciation for the really nice job they did with this engine. And it's mostly complete here except for a recirculation unit that attaches to the breather arm there. And once you get to this point, you can set your motor aside and wait for it to be installed later. With the engine finished, we can now turn our attention to some of the interior parts. And you see the panel 10 here that designates the seats for construction. Now, this is a black seat, and it correctly identifies the insert stripes there as silver. But on the white seats on the samples that I've seen on the internet, those are black. So we're going to make some decals and cut them out and apply them to the seats so that they look nice and clean. Well, now that the engine is done, we can turn our attention to the interior. And you see the panels that we showed you there. So I took photos of the seats, and then I superimposed those onto a drawing program and added some simple shapes to make those inserts with some dark, black. And now I'm going to cut them out precisely so that they fit the actual inserts on the seats, and that'll give them a nice clean look, and rather than trying to paint them against the scalloped padding of the seat. So hopefully these will turn out and look just the way that they should. I actually wish that Revell would have included these, although they would have to do silver and black, but they did that for the outside stripes too. Anyway, you just use decal paper and an inkjet printer, and you can make your own decals for features like this. And you see we've got one stripe applied there on the bottom, and we're going to add one of the upright inserts. And these are going to also require a little setting solution because of the contours in the padding and the edging that's inside the seat. But we've put some on there already, and we'll add a little bit more of that later on. So you can see, just loosen these up. These are decals just like the ones you get in the kit. Put it into place. You have to carefully put it in right into the position where it should go, at least as close as you can. And then you may have to go ahead and finesse it with a toothpick or a hobby knife, however you need to. Now this one is a little long, so up at the top there, after it starts to dry, I'm going to trim that so that it's right up just over the ridge there on the back of the seat. Now we'll work with the shifter, and as you can see, this is kind of a small model by itself. The Hurst shift pattern emblem goes on top of the handle there, the shift handle, and that's painted in a kind of a matte silver, almost a magnesium color. Of course, there's Hurst verbiage along the sides of it. The boot's painted with a black and chrome trim around the base. Now the center console has been painted a satin black, and you see the decal there. That's the number 44, and it's not bad. It's the right width, but it's barely noticeable when it's placed against some dark black. So I'm going to use the Best Model Car Parts version because it has a little bit of visibility. You can see it through the open windows. I used a little white, crystal clear from Micro Set and those products and micro scale products, and I'm going to place that right into the console. This is a clock that goes right up front here, so don't forget that. It's a nice touch for the kit. And now we'll glue the shifter into place. Remember, you got to scrape the chrome off of that or paint if there's any in the base there or on the console to put it into position. I'm using a little slow set glue here, just a little dab. We'll put it in there. It fits perfectly into the receiver on the console. So we'll just go ahead and get that position for insertion into its location, and then you just press it into place, give it just a little bit of pressure, and it's done. You're good. Okay, now never take it for granted, your position. Always test fit your parts first, of course. That's how I knew it would fit right in there, but once you get it into place, look it over. Make sure that it's straight or vertical or horizontal or however it has to be in order to look like it's proper. So we've got the part finished here, and it's ready to install when it's time for that. Now the interior is painted insignia white. Now the interior gets painted a fine white primer from Tamiya, and we're quickly going to show you the masking here for the white version, which is a little different than an all black interior. And we're going to just press that tape into position to make sure that we don't get any leakage out there, although you probably will anyway, which will mean a little bit of cleanup. But with some good Tamiya tape, fresh stuff, and you tamp it down well, you should get very minimal amounts. So this is flat black, and it's just applied to some of the areas here at the base of the door, and then we're going to spread it on there, paint it on there nicely, and try not to get a lot into the lower channel where it meets or is glued to the base plate of the floor pan. So it's really pretty easy to do. Anybody, of course, can do this, and this makes for a nice touch. These carpeted areas here at the base and in this case into the area of the dash sideboard there, they should be dark because they're always getting kicked, so they're going to get shoe prints from the soles of your feet on there constantly, and it's not very easy to clean off, especially if those panels were white. So this is done quite a bit on the upscale interiors, or sometimes they're just plastic, so vinyl, so that it really doesn't matter. You can easily clean that off with a high strength cleaner. And you see here we're going to paint that portion of the back, which is a fold down package shelf, so to speak, behind the rear seat. So it gives you a little bit more room when you're hauling some cargo in this vehicle. And from here you can see the interesting pattern of black in the back end there, where that becomes a package shelf when the seat's folded down. But you'll also note there are some decals here, and there's some wood trim that goes in the panels, and we're going to use some of that chrome pen with a fine brush. You can paint that stuff on. Also those thin strip decals up there, they're the hinges that fold down that back seat, and I think there's a spare there, but there actually could be about 4 or 5 of them to do all the hinge panels on that unit. And so now we're going to pour a little bit of that chrome ink into, or paint into, a bottle cap. I tip it a little bit so it stays in the corner. Then I can use that fine point brush to detail some of the chrome pieces on the interior here. And the door handles, get painted. Some of the door latches and pulls get painted, and it's just a nice touch to add a nice chrome look to those. So I'm going to finish those up, and the detailing will really look nice. And now you can see where some of the decals have been applied, and those door panels are looking nice with the wood trim and chrome. Also, that strip along the top ridge and down in the base there, that decal, which is a hinge, was applied into position. And once it's there, it looks pretty nice. And now we'll move to the dashboard, and these decals are from aftermarket. These are best model car parts. They're actually not decals, they're images, and you just punch them out and you glue them in with some white glue, but they look a little bit more attractive and visible than the kit's decals, which are very nice. I mean, there's no issues with them. These just look a little better, and there's some extra decals on this sheet. So I'm going to opt to use these, and you can see here in the completed dashboard after it's done that you can still see it visible even though you have the obstruction of the wheel and some distance here. So I'm going to use these for my build, and that's how they're installed. You just punch them out with some hole punches or cut them out with a hobby knife and use some clear glue on the backside to glue them into position, and they'll look great. Now that all the pieces are painted and decaled, the decals that go in there, and they're all dried from their adhesives, we're going to assemble them all in one place and then go ahead and put them together into the interior assembly. So as you can see, your dash fits in these notches, and you can see the white spots on there. They're for gluing. You have to scrape the paint off before you put parts together. So go ahead and note the places where that happened. Assembly of the interior is a real pleasure. Everything fits precisely. They've done a nice job with the door panels. I'm going to use a little bit of CA, some super glue on this, as well as some accelerant in the squeeze bottle there. First thing we're going to do, you notice that the pedals have been trimmed in chrome around the rubber pads, and then the stems are flat black, and it fits into two notches right at the forward end of the interior bucket. We'll use a little bit of super glue, CA glue here, and you don't need much. The stuff is pretty good. Just make sure that you scrape off the paint, and it fits into the two notches there in the front. And also note that the pedals are rubber black on the centers, and they're trimmed with some chrome, so those are decorated in that fashion. So put those into place, and then once it's set there, you can go ahead and use a little accelerator, and that's just something that instantly solidifies the adhesive, so you don't have to worry about it moving anymore. Now we use the console, put that into place. Again, a light touch of super glue or CA glue, and note that the paint's been scraped off those edges there. That it goes into place right, of course, over the drive shaft tunnel, and it has been all assembled as we've done earlier with the shifter and the clock decal in place. And you just push it into position up to the end there. It goes all the way up to the front end. So make sure that you get that seated. Then go ahead again and make sure that it is in the correct position. And next we'll move on to the seats, and they fit right onto over some raised areas on the interior floor. And again, a little super glue, and we're going to just position those into place and go right over those humps, so to speak, and they lock right into position. And then once they are in place, you can go ahead again and use a little bit of that accelerant to help make sure that they stay in position where you put them. Now with the seats both in position, you can see how the contrast between the white and the black surfaces are going along. And we'll get these stabilized, and then we'll start to position the side panels. Okay, and they too, of course, have that same motif, color strata, and it's also got some walnut and chrome trim on the handles, which add a nice touch of refinement. It's a rather elegant looking color scheme for an interior, actually. And so the panels have two main tabs at the bottom, and then they also have like an interlocking tab at the back end where it kind of meets the package shelf area, and those portions on the side for the interior mechanisms, etc. back there. So it's simply put into position. I'd start at the back because it kind of locks in there, and slip those tabs in against the side. Okay, get them, make sure they're fully seated so that when they are finally stabilized and glued into position, that you don't have to worry about them being too high or low, which will throw off quite a few things, including your chassis, if you don't get it precisely fitted and make sure that it's in its full stop position. So that's the portion of the interior that you can start with next, and then after that we'll just glue the dash into position. The dashboard gets put into place with two narrow slots on the sides, and there's no guessing about the angle of the dashboard as there were on some of the older designs. It goes right into position there, so you can go ahead and use some super glue on it to put that into place. Just make sure you don't put your fingers on the glue, and then go ahead and position it right alongside. Now, if need be, squeeze these side panels up tight against the dashboard to make sure that it's fully seated both in depth and horizontally. But on my position, my sample, it just fit perfectly. It's a great looking tool. I think Revell has done a real good job of engineering for makeability for this model. So go ahead and get that into place, and your interior bucket is now finished. We'll get these parts out and we'll start working on those. You can see the main chassis and floorboard there, along with some suspension pieces, and note the coloration just pretty much exactly like it's called out in the instructions. The springs are black with a little silver pencil around the coils, and there's steel portions on most of the parts. Note too that the pieces where they're glued together have been scraped clean of paint. Now we're going to get into construction of that. We start with a little part here. It's a canister that goes on the back side, on the back end of the right side, the passenger side there. It's a little air filter. It's painted Ford blue with a white filtration unit, it looks like. A little bit of super glue goes into place there, and you just go ahead and put that into position. I put that in first so that I wouldn't get any interference from the firewall when that's in place, just to make sure that I had clearance to get it into position. So you just, put it there where it goes. And we're going to be working on that firewall, and it's had the brake booster and the master cylinder installed already. The master cylinder was painted a gold tone on top and steel, as well as the booster. It's kind of a steel color. You see the springs there, as I mentioned. They got a little silver pencil around the outside to define the springs around those coils. And so, once again, we're going to be using judicious amounts of glue, and make sure that things stay in the proper position when you put them into place. And next we'll turn the chassis back over. You can see it's painted flat black, and the gas tank there is a steel color. And we're going to start test fitting some of the front suspension pieces into place to make sure that we know where they go. Look for the location and bosses of where those positional pieces go. And these are really actually pretty nice. They're fairly easy to detail, and yet they're easy to construct because they're one piece, for the most part, sections that you just assemble. And there's some notches in the bottom of the brake backing plates up front there, and this lower portion of the suspension goes and fits into those notches, as well as some other receivers. So now that you've got those located, you can go ahead and make sure that you get a small amount of super glue in place where they are put into position. And I say a small amount because if you've got bare plastic, super glue works just about as well on bare plastic as it does on your fingers. It actually holds pieces into position with very little glue. So now we can go ahead and put that other front suspension piece into place. It has had all the paint scraped away so that it will adhere. And it is simply have to rotate it until it gets to where it goes. That large flat piece goes up front. You go ahead and snap that in, including of course those notches at the bottom of the brake plate. So once you've got that into position, we'll set that aside to dry. Well, we painted a lot of the parts in bulk. We just spray painted whole trees, and now it's time to clean those contact areas up from them. It looks nice when you do that. The detail is better, sharper, and clearer, but you still have to clean that off so that you can glue parts together. So the coil overshock nubs are going to get scraped clean, as well as their locating receivers. And we're going to test fit those to see if they fit. Remember, there's a lot of test fitting going on. Just kind of work it in, make sure it goes in place. And next, we're going to glue those into position by using a little slow setting glue, and they go into position before that front suspension piece traps them into place. And you have to make sure that they are fully seated. So, you're going to take your time on this. Make sure that you test fit them beforehand, and that when you put them into place, they seat fully. So prep the corresponding suspension piece there, that sub-assembly we've already put together. And we're going to use, once again, slow setting glue to locate those coils. And they're going to need to be set in there and then kind of stabilized in a more or less a perpendicular state, so that when you drop your front suspension piece into place, they will correspond to the matching receivers on the chassis. So go ahead and put those into position on the suspension portion. And like I said, I use a little slow setting glue so that if, when you're putting it down into position, it's not exactly aligned properly. It's not rigid in place like with super glue. You can move it around to make sure that it gets into the right position into the receiver holes on the chassis. So now with those in place, you can make sure you've got good alignment. And then next we're going to take that and turn it over and put it into position. We've got some super glue that we'll use when it touches the base area, so that we've got a good bond there. But we can also still maneuver and manipulate those around to put them in the proper position. Now we've already test fitted the suspension piece, so that will go into place in the exact place where it needs to go, and make sure that it is fully seated so that we don't get any mislocation of that suspension, and therefore causing us a wheel height issue when we assemble those. Press everything down into place. Make sure that they're fully seated. There's no gaps. You don't want any gaps in the locations where these things go, and that's a common problem because of paint. The thickness of paint can keep your parts from being seated properly, especially in some precision fit places like the suspension parts. going all around it. Make sure that it's in good shape. Before the glue sets, go ahead and press those completely into position. Then use a little bit of the accelerant to make sure that they're locked into place. And you can go around the whole unit where we've added cement to make sure that the entire thing is precisely where it needs to be. Once again, it's important to get your suspension fully seated. Next, we'll be adding the firewall into position, and you see two little upright ledges there. I'm going to put a little glue on each one, this little super glue there, because you want this thing to be fixed into place. Also, it rests against the back of the fender wells, and so you can use that area to put a little glue in there to keep it aligned properly. And that's kind of important to make sure that the rest of the body and everything sits properly and correctly, so that you don't get any kind of angles that would throw off, the stack when you're adding your chassis and the inner bucket to the body. So a little accelerator there will keep that into position. So go ahead and clamp it down, wait for it to set, and you should be in good shape. Next, we'll use a pair of angled tweezers to install the intermediate shaft and the steering box there. The intermediate shaft is dark, a flat black, and it goes into a hole in the firewall, and then you just press the steering box itself against the sidewall with a little glue. Use a little super glue and put some into position where your motor mounts are. There's a couple up front, and of course the support in the back there. And you want some strong glue so that the motor doesn't get bumped and dislodged from there. So go ahead and put it into position, and then make sure that it mounts securely and fully onto the motor mounts and onto the transmission support there across the bottom of the chassis. So get that so that it is perfectly vertical, in the engine bay. Just make sure that you've got a good solid mount for your motor, and that is important for hood clearance as well as appearance. When you get this motor into position, it also technically has an opening to work with in the hood there for the collector. Add some accelerator after it is fully seated to make sure that it will stay there, because you want this nice and secure. So I went ahead, put a little thumb pressure on at least the back one there where the transmission is, to make sure that it does not move. And now we'll work on the drive line and some suspension parts. You can see the crossover exhaust is steel, along with the pipes for the exhaust there, as well as the drive shaft. The other parts are semi-gloss black, including the shocks, but the front portion of the rear differential is kind of a matte red. So we've got the crossover pipes here, and they simply glue into place on the ends of the exhaust pipes coming out of the engine. So we're going to put a little cement on that and go ahead and put it into position. Everything pretty much fit pretty well, but as is the case usually, the exhausts are not perfectly aligned, and so what I do is I do them one at a time, and then I put them into position. Here's the other side being added, and once you've got those together exactly where they are aligned, you put a little accelerator on them and lock them into position. And that seems to be, in my experience, the best way to add your crossover pipes there. And they will stay in position. And of course there's a little brace at the back end there. But next we're going to add the exhaust, the forward exhaust pipes and the muffler. The exhaust pipes were steel, the mufflers are aluminum. And those are put into position in the same way. Do one at a time, and the locating places are perfect. You see the little bosses back there? when they are snapped into their receivers, the exhaust pipe length is exactly correct, which was kind of a rarity on the older model kits. Now this one fits just right. So we're going ahead and we're going to use some super glue, some CA type glue on the forward end and the back end, because once these are in position, you won't need to manipulate them. They will stay right there, and you want them to be permanent. Unlike some of the other parts that we'll install with some slow setting glue in order to be able to manipulate those along later on. So as you notice, I'm going to start at the back end with the two bosses and receivers, and then this one simply sets down and goes right onto the driver's side exhaust pipe crossover. So this is a true dual exhaust. As you see, there's no merging of the crossover pipe into one. And so once it's there, lock it in place. Okay, so next we're going to take another look at the other side. The other side goes into position in the same manner. So we don't have any guesswork, and we can use the one that's installed to make sure the symmetry is correct for both sides. That's why it's pretty nice that you can have some adjustment, just a small amount, but you still are in relatively the same position. So go ahead and put that other exhaust pipe into position. And now we'll continue to move backwards with the rear exhaust pipes, the tail pipes, and those of course come out of the mufflers, and they have a nice receiver in the back. So you want to do some test fitting to make sure that they look like they're going to fit. But I use some slow setting glue here to position them so that they can be manipulated for the correct exit points at the very end of the tailpipe. So once we've got a pretty good idea of how those are installed, I put the, as you see there, I connected it to the muffler first, then you snap the boss and receiver down at the base of the chassis. So once again, these go right into position there. Now they're going to be a little awkward at first, because you really need to kind of make sure that they are positioned so that you can get the axle in there, and then you adjust the width between the two pipes later on after you get all of that into place. So that's snapped into place there, and that's about the right relative position. They'll be a little tighter on the final part of that installation. Now you see here, we're going to spread them out a little bit for access to manipulate the rear end. But first, we have to assemble the rear end. It goes together. There's two pieces there, the flat red piece on the forward portion, and then of course the axle and differential itself. And once those are assembled, we'll be adding the springs to it. Now you see here I'm using a little liquid cement. That's for a good adhesion, but it's pretty accurate to add without getting any spillover onto the part, because it would really show up on your flat, your matte colored differential part there, as well as on a semi-gloss or a gloss surface. So you don't want any excess squeezing out there. So we'll get that all together and make sure that it's in position. And there's a little key on that, those two parts, to help align it so that it's perfectly aligned. So you rotate that until it locks into position. And next we're going to do a little test fitting, make sure that the springs mount properly. By the way, you have to recall scraping off any paint so that you get a good adhesion of the parts. So while we're doing that, we're going to put that together and make sure that it's well adhered. And now we're ready to go ahead and, oh, by the way, look at the ends there. There's no paint on those. They've been removed. Where there's any need, you can use a little black Sharpie pen. to touch up anything that maybe got chipped off when you were removing paint. You won't notice it because they're almost exactly the same sheen for a black. And that's the one beauty about the Sharpie is it blends well to most similar colored paints. Open up the exhaust pipes for easier test fitting, and then we're going to go ahead and test fit the shock absorbers. And these are, of course, at an angle. They're cantilevered against the the rear suspension there. So go ahead and fit those into place. Make sure that you see where they go. And then we're going to go ahead and test fit the the rear suspension assembly along with the axle. And the parts have been glued together, but we're just going to test fit them to make sure that they fit into place. And of course, you got to remove the paint when you want to glue parts together. So do that before you finally put them into position. And they fit right in there. There was no real big issue. Now it's time to we'll show you how the anti-sway bar goes into place in the back. It's manipulated underneath the exhaust, the rearmost exhaust pipes there, and you just kind of hook it underneath there and then worm it around. So you can see from this angle how that's done. You just and that's one of the reasons why we use some slow setting glue on those pipes to still give us a little manipulating room. So go ahead and put it into position. The shock absorbers in the back are next, and they're cantilevered towards the rear axle. And we'll use some slow setting glue because we want to be able to move this piece around when we add the rear axle and spring assembly to mount up with the receiving holes on that. So go ahead and test fit them, add a little slow setting glue, and then we'll put those both into position. And you can see the paint was removed. You got to do that or they won't stick. So go ahead and we've got a few filaments of tube glue here, a necessary evil, but fill those holes and position them in approximately the correct place and position for going into the receivers on the rear axle, and make sure that they're seated fully. So set that aside for just a minute, and now we're going to go ahead and start working with the rear axle and spring assembly. As you can see, make sure that that is glued together properly and is in good position for installation. Next, we're going to once again make sure that your rear exhausts are in the right position. Go ahead and check for proper alignment, and then go ahead and install that rear axle. Now I'm going to use a little slow setting glue on the mounts there for the cantilevered shocks, and then the rest of the unit can actually be glued into place with some more substantial glue. Hook the posts into the frame at the back end, and then just drop it on forward until it locks into position in the front. It snaps right into place and fits perfectly. Then we're going to use the just installed glue that is still a little pliable to install the drive shaft into the motor and the rear differential. So go ahead and grab that piece and add it to those to the holes and receivers in both of those units. At this point, the under chassis is coming along nicely, and here's a look at what you should be expecting on yours at this point. We can work on our tire and wheel assemblies now. As you can see, the wheel backs and the inserts there have been painted steel color, and the chrome pieces are excellent, and but still they've got connectors, and so where you need to clean those up, go ahead, use your hobby knife, make sure that anything that's out of the ordinary is removed. And then we've got some tools here. We'll show you how we're going to clean those up in just a second. But the sand stick can be your friend, as well as sandpaper. So go ahead and clean that up, and make sure that the wheel back surfaces that are going to be glued together look very good and clean and smooth, so that you get a good adhesion. And then, as you see, there's decals here for this sidewalls. Now, I prefer this because sidewall script to be in scale is too shallow to paint. But if you've got a nice set of decals to put on a smooth-sided tire, you get the best possible look for an in-scale and good-looking original equipment tire with the side script available as a decal. Once you've got your wheel pieces all cleaned up, you can go ahead and test fit some of the assembly here. Just make sure that the surfaces contact each other, and you're going to glue them into position with some thin cement. Now, as you can see here, I've added a little bit of material here to the outside, and that'll retain the tire in position once you get it into place. But that's not absolutely necessary. That's kind of a choice. I don't like my tires to slip around. So as you can see, the backing plate goes into position, but what you need to do is remember, you got to add that insert first. That's the part that if you want your wheels to rotate, it connects to the stub on the chassis and allows them to turn. So go ahead and put that into position, don't forget it, and then make sure that it still turns. You can actually just turn it with a hobby knife or even your finger. Make sure that it continues to rotate, and then press them together. Make sure you've got a good adhesion. Now the tires can also have the tread area sanded a little bit so that they look much more authentic. And the one on the right here, as you see, is exactly what you're looking for. So you want to go ahead and just take that tire and just kind of scuff it a little bit on some fine sandpaper until you get a consistent look all the way around. And then once that's done, you can check it over after you're finished and hit any spots that need a little bit more work, and then just dust it off. It's time to add those decals to the sidewalls, and because they're so smooth, you won't need to paint them with any gloss coat or anything. Just use warm water, and these decals come off fairly quickly. So after about 10 seconds, they're ready. And they're just the right thickness to apply. So go ahead and get that ready. And then we're going to put a little bit of the setting solution. That's the first part of a two-step. That's all you'll need, something just for adhering the part there. So put a little on the sidewall. It doesn't take a lot. And go ahead and put your decal into position. You just I always kind of smudge it there to make sure you get some adhesion glue on the back side of your decal. And these are very delicate, but they go right into place. Put it into place there, and then if you need to manipulate it, you can. Push it around with either your brush or something else. Sometimes you need a little sharp point like a toothpick or maybe even your hobby knife. But you want it to be concentric to the wheel, and make sure that it looks proper when it's in position. So with that one in, we can go ahead and start with the other one. Now, keep in mind that your tires are symmetrical, and these decals and these sidewall scripts are mirrored opposite each other. So as to say, one's at 12 and one's at 6. They're right straight across from each other, and the middle of the decals are matching. They're matching to the middle of the other decal. So you want to keep that in mind when you're putting the decal into position. Again, warm water, smudge it a little bit, go ahead and add the decal to the other side. And this one is probably going to take a little bit more positioning because it has to match the one on the other side. Go ahead, don't be afraid, put it into place. And you'll see that once these are on, they look very authentic. And the raised letters on those tires are not very high, so in scale, they're very difficult to dry brush or paint. So as you can see here, I'm using a toothpick to manipulate and put this one into position. Once you've got it in place, go ahead and set this aside to dry, and then continue on with the other 3 wheel and tire assemblies. And just when you thought you were done, oh no, there's more. There are some decals for the hubcaps. That's right, the emblems that go on the end of the hubcaps come on decal number 14. There's 4 of them, and they're very small. And these are the ones we talked about with a slight change in register, so those have been trimmed. Now just warm it up, put it towards the edge, and then use a sharp point or a toothpick to put it near position at least. We're using setting solution here as a base. Now we just move it into place. And it's small. You may need some special help to get to that, but go ahead and use a tissue to draw off any and wick off any of the excess fluid so that it doesn't drift off on its own as it dries. And then there you have it. Continue with the other 4 and your wheels will be finished. You'll see how well they match the black painted inserts on the wheel. When they dry, put a little dot of clear lacquer or paint on them to set them off and keep them in position, as well as giving them a little shine like the actual ones do. They'll look really nice, and this will preserve the caps so that if you touch them, they won't get rubbed off or chipped off. Next we'll add some pieces to the underhood area. The first one there, part 96, that silver part, it's aluminum. It's an electronic component. And then we've got the washer bottle, which we're going to tape off and paint. And that's part 91. And the third part there, the blue and silver part, that's a component that goes on this fender wall, and of course the battery. So each one of these has its corresponding decals. And we're going to use a little piece of tape there to mark the water line on our washer bottle so that it looks more authentic. But I will caution you that the small yellow decal there that's up by the electronic or the sidewall part, you will not see that after it's put into place. It does not have the opacity needed to show up. But each of the parts, of course, has been painted, and you can see there's Ford blue on the one part. But the battery is it's kind of a model all of its own because of the decals. Now I went and I clipped off the battery posts because I didn't want my caps on a decal to be hanging in the middle of the air there. And then what I did was the stubs that were left, I just painted them. First I painted them white, and then I painted them red. And I always clip off the part numbers from the decals, and you can quickly go ahead and finish up these parts and have them ready for positioning and installing into the engine bay. In front of the frame, you'll see there's horns up there. We'll be putting the wheels and the horns and these other pieces in place that we showed earlier. But you see that V-shaped part? That's a fender brace, and it's got a little trick to it. It has a slot at the bottom of the V there, which is draped over some notches in the firewall. And so it's a little bit tricky. I had to open that up a little bit, actually, to get the part to fit over that nicely. And then it attaches to the top of the, where the coil springs are. And so we're going to put that into position. That point to the spring areas there, you see. And then we've got the other items that we're going to put into place. And we'll show you a kind of a close-up still shot here that will give you an indication of where these are. You'll be able to see most of them, but I want to emphasize the fender brace because that particular item needs some a little extra work in order to get it to go into position. And you see the white arrow there is pointing at that little notch at the bottom of the V that drapes over that little slot on the firewall. So once you get that opened up so that it fits nicely, that way it'll be down flush and it won't interfere with either the body or anything in the hood area. So you want to make sure that that thing is in position all the way down and you trim it out so that it fits perfectly in place. Let's take a little closer look at placement here. The yellow arrow indicates that washer bottle, part 91, and you can see how it was painted with a semi-gloss black, white, and kind of a blue fluid level at the base. It just goes onto a ledge on the fender wall there on the driver's side, and the two white arrows indicate proper positioning of the vehicle's. The red arrow points to the battery, and that just sits on a shelf at an angle in the engine compartment. Now, I've seen it with both the posts facing the engine and facing the firewall, so I put mine in with the posts facing the engine, but I'm not sure which is correct. Now, that is right in front of part number 95, and that's that multi-colored part. And that's the green arrow that indicates that. Now, it's got a little, I'm going to say, a little bump on the back side of it, and it fits right into a recess in the fender wall. The blue arrow, that's that electronic part, that's part 96, and it just glues to the area there on that, the inside of that shock tower. The radiator assembly with the support and shroud are assembled next. And you see that it has a decal on it, goes on top of the shroud or the radiator assembly there. Also the upper radiator hose, that'll be assembled, and we'll put this together. There's no secrets about assembly, and you see that we scraped off the paint so that when we put the glue contact points into position, it'll get good adhesion. So go ahead and do that and set this aside just for a moment. Now the radiator hoses, typically, I don't put those on until after the engine is installed to make sure that I have both contact positions to locate them properly. We can locate the radiator hoses now that we have the radiator assembly and the engine in place. We're going to do it from both directions, so we need to use some slow setting glue to locate the upper on the engine side. We're just going to put that into position and let it kind of get tacky, we'll, as you can see, you're going to need to kind of manipulate it, make sure that it stays in position, and I ended up having to re-tweeze it in, make sure that it's put into that little spot where it goes on the engine block. And then once you've got that finally into position, you can locate your lower hose to the radiator side with the same thing, a little slow setting tube glue, and then just put it into position. By the way, you want to test fit this all out before you put the glue on. And then you can add it to the radiator side there, and then go ahead and locate it into position, and you can guide those ends of the hoses into their proper mating position on the opposite ends. Next, we're going to add the decals. First, decal number 20 is applied to the upper radiator hose. And same thing applies for this type of decal. Put a little setting solution on there to make sure that it will adhere. And then go ahead and get it in some warm water. Give it a little smudge around to get some adhesive on the back side. And then move it into position using something pointy or some other method to make sure it's located pretty close. Then go ahead and manipulate it until it's perfect. And finally, we're going to put the shroud decal on. The same principle applies. It goes right on top of the shroud for the fan, and then it's of course facing the front of the car so that it's readable when you open the hood. So that goes into position. To add your wheel and tire assemblies, there's two schools of thought. One is for your wheels to rotate, to be looking more actual to the real thing. And to do that, I use some tube glue so that after I set the wheels in place, I can make sure that they will continue to rotate before the glue sets. Just turn them every so often, make sure that they continue to go around. And once you've got that done, you put a little glue just on the end of the axles, and then you can go ahead and push your wheels into position. and that way they'll start to set, but there's not a lot of glue on there to get spilled over onto the rotating portion. Just make sure you do it carefully, and if you do get a little on there, with slow setting glue, you can continue to turn them to make sure that the glue doesn't get set into position and melts the styrene on the parts, so that you will be able to continue to rotate those tires once it has hardened on the portions that need it to adhere the wheel to the axle stubs. So once you've done that, you're all done and you're on four wheels. Next, we'll be working on the tail panel using a little stoplight red. We're going to paint the clear tail lights, and then we'll also use some chrome pen and some foil. Additionally, there's some decals that are used just for this tail panel. So we add a little light coat of the clear red, and you can always go back over it if it isn't dark enough to suit you. But go ahead and we'll paint those up and get those ready, and then we'll work on the rest of the tail panel. Well, that'll give these pieces a chance to dry. So once you finish that up, just set them aside and hold on to them for later. One thing that you may have noticed is that I've turned this tail panel around backwards from the way it's described as being used and installed in the kit. It seems to me that the detailing for the trim around the taillights was more accurate on the back side than on the front side. So I determined to do that, and I want to foil and clean these up. I used a little hobby knife. There's some little sprue points inside there, and trim those off. And then I'm going to add some gold metal foil to go around the trim, and as well as some of the chrome paint to paint the vertical runners. And you do that just by applying, some of the gold metal, bare metal trim onto, the surface, sticking it on there, and then pushing it down so that you can see those ridges around the outside trim, because they're very hard to paint accurately, but they're easy to do with some bare metal foil applied. So we're going to go ahead here and add that to both sides, and then we're going to press it into position to make sure that it sticks to those features and contours on the outside of the trim. Now, the one way to make sure is to go ahead and use a thumbnail, a fingernail, and press those into the outside ridges of your feature to make sure that there's enough material to cover them all the way to the base plate. And that's because, believe it or not, you're using up material, and if you cut yourself short, then you will miss a portion of the feature that you want to put trim onto. So go ahead and press those into place around the outside, because on the inside we're going to cut that at diagonals to the corners of each of those little windows, and then you can just peel it around there, and you'll have plenty of material to wrap around the feature. You don't have to worry about running out of and stretching it. So this is done with a very sharp hobby knife. Make sure that it's a new hobby knife blade, for example. And then you just cut it at the diagonals, as you see here, each one. So there's 12 of them on each of these taillights. And then you start pressing them in and around through the backside. Use something to get in there if you need to. In this case, a rounded toothpick will do. And go ahead and get those things situated so that you've got coverage through around the perimeter trim. The inside isn't so important. We're not going to rely on the trim for that. We're going to paint that with some chrome paint. And so go ahead and then you can kind of push it into position and make sure that it's sticking into place by kind of pressing it with the side of the toothpick and making sure that you've got good adhesion so that the bare metal foil doesn't come out. There's some excess on the backside. You can just trim that off. It's not necessary to go really all the way around at all, hardly the backside. You can leave a little to make sure it doesn't come out and around. Now, once you've got that in position, then you can go ahead and start trimming very carefully around that bezel for the tail light trim. And it's very pronounced. So go ahead using that sharp knife and just follow those edges all the way around. Go around the corners slowly. Make sure that you've got good adhesion still. You see me stick it back down into place there when it started to peel out. And then go ahead and cleanly cut that off around the outside. And once you get this finished and you get both your tail lights trimmed out, they're going to look great. In fact, they're going to look almost identical to the one-to-one car. And I'm not sure if it was a mistake by Revell, or it's just my perception of how the actual part looked. But I think this is a much more clean representation of the real thing. I don't recommend this to the novice. You don't have to do this. You can just install it just the way that it was intended. But for my purposes, I thought this is going to make this car and this tail panel really stand out and look authentic. So that's why we're foiling the trim, and we've turned the tail panel around backwards. But that also leaves us with another problem, and I'll show you that in just a minute. You see me start to burnish that down to make sure that we've got good adhesion of the foil to the part. Now we're just going to peel off the excess pieces here, you see, all the way around. And if you find a piece is stuck there, you can go ahead and just trim it again. Make sure that you get a good clean cut. Once you've got the trim into place, you can go back around it and just make sure that you burnish it into position and give it a nice shine, get out any of the wrinkles. And then once that's finished, you just shine her up and you're done with that piece. Next, we'll start looking at that tail panel again, and we compare it. We'll notice that on the back side, there's a little notch in there that is supposed to be for locating the gas filler cap. So we're going to have to change that around as well. So I use my dead center boring tool here, and it does a nice job of putting a hole exactly where you want it. So use that and go ahead and just give that a few twists back and forth, and it will just kind of bore a hole right through this styrene to get it started, so that I know exactly where I want it. So I clean it up from the other side here, just a couple of twists, and then I'm going to use a sharp hobby knife, because as I said, it was a slot, kind of a slot that fits in there, and so I'm putting a slot on this side, a nice clean one that will fit the mating piece for the gas filler cap later on. So just going to clean that up and get that ready. As you can see here now, it's wide open, and I've got a place to relocate that filler cap from initially the other side where it was intended to go to this side, which I think looks much better. So it's kind of a little bit of modifications in a sense. Now, did you know that you can use Molotow chrome paint from its refill container to paint by brush and or spray? It works perfectly well. It thins with most lacquer thinner, and if you need to, but mostly right out of the tube. It's a nice finish, and we're going to use that for those vertical spokes because they're so thin. They don't take foil very well. It's hard to manipulate them and keep them in position. So we're just going to put a little of that chrome paint on there and finish those up. And you can see it gives a nice brilliant chrome appearance. It's almost exactly matching the chrome foil. So that's a good pair. We'll finish that up, and once that is done, you've got both sides done. Your tail panel is looking excellent, so go ahead and call it good. We'll finish off this tail panel a little early by adding the tail light lenses to the bezels. Those go in from behind, and also that gas cap cover and its decal, along with the decal that goes on the two tail lights. So we're going to take and pop those in from behind, and they'll snap right in there, and they won't come out unless they're jarred. But in order to make sure they don't, we're going to be adding a little bit of liquid cement around the edges to make sure that they stay in place. So we're going to use that to just go around the outside, just a light amount. All it needs is a little touch really to keep them in position, because they're going to be on the inside of the vehicle and they won't be touched, although there is some jarring that could take place when you set the model down. So I'm going to go ahead and glue those in just around the edges and let that set. And you'll notice that that piece of part there on the green thing, that's tape. That's what I use to keep small parts from squirreling themselves away or skittering off the table onto the carpet. Now, we've snapped our gas cap cover in place, and we'll use that same liquid cement to go ahead and get it to adhere to the back panel. So once you've got that done, the decals are for the taillight lenses. So those are added to the inside panel. Get the back panel out, and we're going to install that into the body. It looks the way I want it, and it just goes onto a ledge inside there, a thin ledge. So you're going to scrape the paint off of there to glue it. And then you're going to add the tail panel into position, and it just then rests against the edges of the rear quarter panel. So put that into the slot there. Just set it into the back where it will go. And then we're going to take and add a little liquid cement along the inside edge there to get it to stay in position, just like we did the tail light lenses. And that's all you need. It's not going to go anywhere. Once you've got some glue on it, just make sure that it's properly positioned for its final resting place. And then you can go ahead and set it aside to await the next step in the process. But as you can see, the body is starting to really shape up with the addition of that tail panel, and next we'll add some more pieces to that. Interior body parts are up next, including the window glass, the visors, the mirror, and there's also, you see, that small piece there. That is a detail that goes into the center of the roof, right behind these visors, and that's your courtesy lamp, and also the rear view mirror. Now, on the glass, you'll find some excess ports there, the little sprue parts that are made to ensure that the pour or the injection is complete. You see those little tabs? They're kind of like little buttons. Those need to be trimmed off and then carefully sanded off so that you've got a nice clean fit, because the fit for the windows is precise. So we'll turn this over and we'll get started on it right away. We need to do some detail and prep work for these pieces. The visors, for example, have little posts on the ends which are actually part of the real car, and we're going to use a chrome pen to just touch those with a little piece of chrome. And that's what it uses to hinges the visors on. So we'll get that done, and then we will set those aside to dry. But just adds a little touch of detail. Don't cut them off, they're supposed to be there. Now the next thing that we're going to do is work with the mirror. Now the mirror is of course a mirror face, but the back of it was black. It's a black vinyl carrier, I believe. Nonetheless, we're going to scrape the chrome plating off of there, because if you paint over chrome, it tends to come off easily, and I don't want it to do that because it might get scratched on installation. So we're going to scrape all of that chrome off of there, and then we're going to use a Sharpie. Yeah, that's right, which just the right sheen for this thing, and to give it a nice black but slightly shiny look, although not a complete gloss. It's kind of a semi-gloss. So just use a Sharpie to clean, to add color to the backing of that mirror. And you may need to use a fine point to get into the corner near the stem. But that will give you a pretty nice look for authenticity for your model. And also cleaner than paint and nothing to clean up afterwards. And so next we're going to work with the window glass. As we mentioned, there's some overflow ports there attached, and so we're going to snip those off close, with our nippers. And then we're going to use a sharp hobby knife to go right straight down and clean those off. Just kind of shear them off, make sure you don't gouge into the window, and then we'll follow that up with a sand stick. We're going to use a sand stick here, but get those cleared, sheared right off to the edges. Now just finish it up by carefully, sanding off those ridges. Make sure that you look at it from different viewpoints. Go ahead and all of them need to be cleaned off, including, of course, the other windows. Even the side quarter or rear quarter windows there, they'll need to be cleaned up too. So get those cleaned up and set them aside because this is a precise fit and it snaps in. So you're going to need to get all of those stubs off of the edge of the window. We'll take a look at doing some detailing work with the windshield. I'm going to take some of the Tamiya tape for curves. It's white and it's a little over an 1/8 inch wide, and we're going to mask off the very bottom of this thing, which from the kit manufacturer has a frosted appearance. So we're going to follow that line right around and put a gentle curve on it, just like the original. And this sometimes has to be done a number of times to get it just right, because curves are difficult to follow sometimes. So we're going to put it on the edge there and kind of make sure that it's stuck pretty well at that point. And then we're going to start curving it around on that frosted portion. And that's because this has a paint. It's got a paint to it. So we're going to cover, of course, the windshield part of that, not the frosted part, right on the line, and then carry that around until we're finished with it. And then we'll paint that to duplicate the feature of the dark, matte. I guess, I don't know if it's matte, but it's some kind of a finish that they put on there to kind of cover up the business end at the bottom of the windshield. We'll give it a couple of coats of flat black there, light coats. Make sure you tamp down the tape to ensure that nothing seeps through it. It's pretty good at retaining paint. It's made for this. So go ahead and put a few light coats on there, and try not to get it on the other side of the glass, although it probably wouldn't matter. But you're just going to paint this thing with I'm using a flat black because I don't think you can see through it, and it's down at the base, so I don't think it's meant to show anything through it. So once you get it through, make sure there's no streaks, touch it up at the edges, make sure that you cover the whole thing fully, and it should be fine. So go ahead and set that aside to dry, and we'll get to that later. Just peel the tape back and set her down and review it to make sure that there's no issues with the unit, that you may have to remove any edges or any seep through with a toothpick. We'll continue to work on the detail pieces with the dome light, and we're going to put a piece of reflective foil on it on the back side, the part that will glue to the roof of the car, and just stick that into place. Make sure that it's well adhering by getting it positioned, and then pushing it together there onto it and real tight. Then we're going to remove the excess from the outside, and that's a simple matter if you can get it off of your finger. And then we're going to use a sharp hobby knife, always a nice new one, to remove all of the excess from around the outside of the light. Just trim it off next to the edge, very close to the edge there. And once you get that all off, we can actually glue that with the foil backing right to the dome area on the roof of the car. So set that aside for now, and we'll get to it later. Talk about detail. The side windows here have some molding trim that's molded into them on the leading edge, and we're going to have to address that. And like I said, the best way to do it is with foil if you're trying to imitate chrome. So we're going to add a piece of chrome foil to the forward edge of these rear quarter windows, and then we're going to trim it off. So you simply make sure you clean it off, but you can see the edge there. It's raised. It's a raised ridge, and that's the to simulate the chrome trim that's on the actual window that divides the quarter window from the main windows. So we're going to go ahead and put that on, and then we're going to crease it all the way around to make sure that it sticks well, but not so much around the backside, because we want to take that off. We don't want it to impede the vision of the window. So we're going to carefully go ahead with a sharp knife and run it across that ridge to remove the foil from that area. And once we get that done, we'll peel that portion off. On the back side, however, we're going to just kind of slide this knife along the shelf by inserting it in the middle first, and then we're going to peel it out towards the edge to get a nice clean cut, and then you've got a nice looking piece of trim to add to your model's rear window quarters. To add some of the parts to the interior there, we're going to use a couple of different adhesives. First, the super glue you saw there, and that's just for the visor. And then we're going to use some crystal clear, that's a micro scale product, to put the glass into place. So first we're going to add a little bit of that CA glue to the spot where it's adhered to on the inside of the body there on the roof, and that's just behind the top of the windshield. You'll probably still see that through the windshield, that white strip there, but it goes right into place. It fits right in there, and you noticed we had scratched off the paint before we adhered it to the body. So just push it into place and make sure it's in position. For the windows, we'll start with the quarter windows there by the C-pillars, and there's a little shelf right there that you rests on the top, and then around the edges it kind of glues to the side in the back there. So we're going to put that into place with some crystal clear glue. But because it's out of the way, before we get to the windows, we're going to add that dome light right into position there in the middle of the roof. Same thing, use some crystal clear, and then go ahead and take the part that we'd prepared earlier with the foil backing into position on the slot. It fits perfectly, so go ahead and just pop that into position, and you've got a really nice touch to add to the interior authenticity of your model. So go ahead, we'll set that aside after we get that done. And if you see any squeeze out there of the crystal clear, you can just wipe that off with a toothpick, and if needed, a cotton swab that's damp. So next we're going to start working with the C-pillar windows, and you'll see how that goes. We can use our toothpick to add a little clear cement to both the ledge there, the ridge that the top of the window sets on. And we'll also put a little around the sides there of the back of that window in order to get that glue to adhere to the side as well as just the top. So we got a good secure positioning for it. We just use that same toothpick and just put a little bit, not much, along that side. You don't really want it to squeeze out and be obvious, so just enough to tack it into position. Go ahead and grab that piece, and of course be sure that the trim is facing towards the front, and you'll be able to see how it fits there. It's the same shape as the C window basically, so just put it into place and lightly tack it into position there so that it adheres with the glue. Do the same thing for the other window, and now we'll start working on that rear backlight window. It fits precisely into the opening, and it fits flush, and so you have to make sure, again, that you've trimmed it off nicely, and maybe even put a little bit of bevel off the edges because you've got some foil in there now. It's a precise fit, and we're going to add a little bit of the crystal clear glue around the ridges, and this will probably squeeze out some glue. So later on, you'll need to use a damp a Q-tip or something in order to clean that off, and it cleans off nicely, as this is a water-based cement or adhesive, and so you'll be able to do that. So just follow along the ridges and add little bits, and then you can kind of drag that toothpick around, and make sure that it kind of flows some out to the through the entire ridge there, just like that. With the white glue around the perimeter, we can now get that window glass and go ahead and install it into the opening. So I just started it up at the forward end, okay? Oh yeah, then there's always fingerprints, but clean it off the best you can before you install it. But I just started it off at the forward end by holding the edges, basically, and then putting it into, oh, by the way, there are corners on this thing that one's rounded and one's more sharp as far as the corners go. So take a look at that, because it has a more rounded one and then a sharper one. The rounded one goes in the front, okay, towards the front of the vehicle, and the more sharp corners go in the back. Then I just, like I said, put it in right there on the front edge, and then you just lower it down, and it almost snaps into position precisely without a lot of pressure. Once that's done, when she's dry, you can clean it up again, and you've got a really nice looking backlight window in place. The window shield is installed next, and then the rear view mirror. The window first to avoid knocking the mirror off, but actually it won't matter. I'll show you a technique that will nullify the old glue the windshield rear view mirror into place. So we're going to put a little white glue around the frame, of course, and then we'll add the mirror later. And I'm going to show you that technique that I use, which is a little bit uncommon, but I've never had it fail, and it's always worked for me. They've never come off. I use some double-sided sticky tape. So here, we're going to add a little of the white glue to the perimeter around the windshield frame. And once that's in place, we're going to grab the window. And this one starts at the top as opposed to the back window. So we're going to push it into place right up at the top. And then we're going to snap it down into position. Now, there's no ledge at the bottom to keep it from sliding, so make sure that that doesn't happen. And that has to be in place so that the interior won't bump into the bottom of the window. So go ahead and put it into position. Now, you'll probably find it's going to squeeze out some glue, and that's pretty common. It's a tight fit. So just use a damp Q-tip or tissue to remove it. So that there's none that's visible. Next, I'm going to show you the technique for using the double-sided tape. This stuff is used in mounting your cell phone glass, window glass, into your phone, and it's available on the internet. It's pretty ubiquitous. You can find it in just about many places, so you can just search for that. And I just take a little piece off. I cut it off, and then I use that little nub, and it actually looks like the mounting thing that is used for the mirrors in the first place. It's got a backing on it, so once you cut it off, you can apply it just by turning that over and sticking the stem of the mirror onto it. Next, you just stick it into place on the windshield where you want it, and believe it or not, if you have to, you can pull it off and just stick it in another place to readjust its position. It's really easy to use. Next, we'll add the interior bucket to the body shell now that the glass is in place. We're going to use some strong glue here, a little on the front ridge and a couple on these two locating bosses in the back. They go right over some pegs right behind the rear window glass. So just slide it in towards the front like that. and drop it on those pegs, and then it will snap into position in the front as well. So push it down and get it into place. And then once you've got that in place with some CA glue, you can add a little accelerator to it to make sure that it instantly bonds and locks into position. And with that done, we've now got our unibody, so to speak. Be careful where you press things together, but make sure that it's fully seated so that it doesn't cause any issues. We're ready to match the chassis to the body now. We're going to put those together, but before we do that, we're going to take care of one little detail. These tail lights. We can really increase the authenticity of those by adding a little foil backing on the inside here, just right behind the tail lights. Now, chrome foil is not as shiny on this adhesive side, but it is shiny enough to make this work. We'll just grab a piece of foil that's big enough to cover the tail lights, but not too big as to flow over into an exterior part that you can see. Go ahead and put it into place, and then just kind of tamp it down into position. Not too hard, you don't want to pop the lens out. Just kind of put it into place there so that it sticks in position and provides a reflective surface on the back side of your tail light. Then you take a look at it, you'll see there's a nice look to it. It has like an authentic lens appearance. So it's just another little trick for authenticity. This kit is well engineered, and to prove it, you'll find out what happens when you put your chassis onto your body. Simply spread it out and snap it in. It doesn't need any glue to stay in place. And with that in place, you can see that the body and the chassis mated together are really starting to make your model look more finished. So we're headed into the stretch, and we'll finish pretty soon. Gather up the front end pieces that you see here, and we're going to be using a couple of the Molotow chrome pens, the 2 and the 1 millimeter unit. We'll start out with the 2 millimeter unit, and we're going to start to outline the headlights and then fill those in with a little bit of chrome paint for reflectivity as well. Now, as you can see, it's nicely raised, and you just you go ahead and use the tip of it and add that highlighting carefully, of course, to the raised ridge of the headlight bezel. And then once that's done, you can go ahead and fill that space in. Just go around, make sure you don't get any out on the other parts of the painted grill area, and it really looks pretty good once you get the headlights into place. It's fairly realistic. So we're going to do that to both headlights, and then we'll move along. Next, we'll add that same feature to the trim around the grill. So the whole large grill area, that big opening there, has a trim piece that really sets it off. With the chrome, look to, of course, the trim area itself. It shows off that large flat black grill, and it was quite an impressive look. The old blacked out features that they had in the late 60s and early 70s were pretty striking. Of course, the contrast makes it look really great, but just use your pen and go ahead and outline the ridges around that grill area. The lower part of that grill trim, however, presents a challenge. You can't get your 2 millimeter pen in there, so we'll switch to the 1 millimeter pen to highlight just the very top ridge of that lower trim, because it's right in front of a piece of fascia that's underneath it. So it's going to be careful and slow, but go ahead and clean that up and get that trim painted. Next, we're going to add some detailing to this front end. You can see those two pieces of silver chrome parts there on the green tape. That serves to keep them from moving around as we give them some detailing, because we just want to detail the inserts, or I should say the inset portions, where the lenses are, with some clear orange. So we're going to use a fine brush and just go ahead and start applying that into the recesses there, and we're going to let the fluid nature of the paint just flow into the recess and fill that cavity so that it has a realistic look and gives you basically what looks like a real reflector. Once again, adding to the authenticity. Now there's some features in the center of it, and the paint will kind of flow out and away from those, so it's going to look really nice when we're finished. Next, we'll paint the front side of these lenses real quickly, and they simply get a light coat of orange. They're supposed to be kind of a semi-clear lens with a little bit of orange tint to them. So you want to get it kind of consistent. And then we're going to finish up with those two, and we'll set those aside to dry here. Try and get them each the same as far as the look that they have for the amount of opacity with these orange lenses. Now, this piece is the front stone pan, and we're going to add the chin spoiler to it. So we scraped off some of the paint there. Now we're going to add a little thin glue and spots, and we're going to tack it into position to make sure that it's in the right space. There's no way to positively attach this. There's no positive stops on it. You simply are going to glue it to the front edge there, and then you're going to angle the chin spoiler a little bit so that it has that downward appearance. After that, I went and added some super glue to the joint. Now, this also ends up rendering your paint there bad. You're going to end up having to clean this up and repaint it. Now, I suggest that you assemble these two pieces before you paint them so that you don't have to do this twice. Now that we've got the outlines and the chrome detailing done on the grill face, we can start to apply the turn signals and the parking lights there that we've painted with our clear orange. We've let that dry, and we'll get to the headlights later. Also, there's a decal there that goes in the center. That's your prancing horse. No, well, actually it's a running horse in the Mustang in the middle of the grill, but that's last. And so for right now, we're going to go ahead and take a look at installing these lenses. Now, first, we're going to use our old friend foil to put a reflective backing behind this orange lens. So you just place that into position, and you can, squish it on there pretty tight because we're just going to trim off the excess there with a hobby knife. And as always, you have to use a sharp one. Make sure that you put it on a surface so that you can clean that up and get that taken off the back side. After you've got those prepared, you can go ahead and get them ready for application into the grill. Now, I'm going to use, in this case, I'm going to use some tube glue, and that is good for setting them into position, and it sticks pretty well. As you know, it's kind of a sticky glue. So we're going to use that property to place the lenses into position, and then make sure that you can manipulate them so that they're exactly in the right space. Once those are done, you can go ahead and start working on the rest. Finally, once again, make sure everything is in the right spot. Before that, you let go of that part and the glue starts to set. So we'll take the other lens group here that are set inside the grill work, and we'll do the same thing with them. The back side of these doesn't necessarily need to be scraped off because this sticky glue is basically kind of just to keep it in place, and it's inside of a little nacelle, so it's going to stay there once you get it in position and the glue is dried. So go ahead and do that. We've got a little tube glue handy here. We'll put just a little bit in there. You can also apply it with a toothpick or something like that if you want to make sure that you don't get too much on there. Remove those stringers, and then go ahead and set that in your in position there. You see the lens going right into place there. Do the same thing for the other side, And after we get those into position, we'll have the accessory lamps all set. And you can see the grill is coming along pretty nicely. And with these appointments and reflective backings, we've got a really nice looking feature on our hands here. We'll tackle those headlights next, the lenses, and you see those tabs that appear at the top here? Those will actually go at the bottom of the headlight nacelles. Now, this is a nice feature because those grid lines that are in the lenses, they need to be oriented properly. So we'll show you here on the instruction sheet the piece that you are going to apply those lenses to. You see the nacelle there at the bottom is a little receiver where those notches will be oriented so that the headlight looks proper. Next, we're going to add those headlights, and this is quite often a source of irritation for many modelers, but there are ways now to make it a real nice piece of work. I use a tape strip to put on the face, just enough tape to put on the outside of the headlight with sticky part and a part to hold on to apply the lens to the nacelle. Now, once you get the tape into position, you can use that, of course, to put a handle on it, so to speak, and rotate the headlight into position, even if there's not receivers there. Apply a little of that crystal clear or white glue to your headlight bezel. Not a lot. You just want enough to kind of coat the perimeter, but not so much as to cause any big amounts to have to dry, because it'll take a long time once they're captured inside by the headlight lens. Then grab your handle, put the headlight lens into position, and then just go ahead and rotate that into place. Make sure that the grid is perfectly aligned. And then once you've gotten that finished off, you can set it aside and let it dry, tear the tape off, and there you have it. Here's just one final touch for your grill assembly, and that's that decal that goes in the center. The galloping horse is a staple of the Mustang, and in various forms it's been on every one of them. So we're going to use a little setting solution to put it in place, first underneath, and then go ahead and establish its position, then adjust it, make sure that the horse is pointing in the right direction, moving to the left, and use something to get it there, and then go ahead after that's set a little bit and put some more solution on top, and you are done. There appears your really nice looking grill assembly. Next, we'll tackle some of the underhood decals, and these are going to be placed in various locations in the underhood area. Some of them are quite different. This is the most extensive decal set I've seen in a car model. You see these here? These are called inspection stickers, the small ones in front. We're going to cut those all up into individual pieces and cut off the numbering system. So you want to do them one at a time so you get them in the right place. But that's where your investigation comes in with respect to the location of these various stickers. From what I could determine, there's no specific and exact place for all of the inspection stickers to be located on your car to represent the actual. The ones for the radiator, and the associated hose there, those things are pretty straightforward. They all go in the right place. But the inspection stickers, as you'll see, they kind of vary, and I don't even think that it's by model. It may just be by the year that they're applied and by the plant, as well as the individual inspectors who look over the work and determine where to place their inspection sticker. And of course, those are designed so that when the final assembly sees that sticker, they know that the inspector has approved all the processes are in place and the tests have been done, etc. But I think that's pretty impressive on the part of Revell. And you'll see here I'm going to start adding some of these stickers, and I'll show you a close-up shot so that you can see where I placed mine, but that is not definitive of where they all should in fact go. It's just the best guess that I could get from the information I could. At this point we can assemble the front end, and as you see I'm going to use some aftermarket markings here. Those car plates in the kit are just fine, but I'm going to supplement mine with a pair of Michigan plates because I'm partial to that. And we're going to add the grill, of course, the front bumper, and the roll pan and the chin spoiler. So we're going to get those pieces ready, but I had to make this little license plate bracket for the license plate because it didn't come with the kit. So we're going to put that into place as well and just glue that to the front underneath the bumper. Now let's take a look at assembling the grill. We're going to first take and show you where the location parts are. There's a couple of ridges on the inside there, but always test fit your part first. You see that little white scrape there? That's where it rests against and inside the fender wells. There's also a couple of bumps on the front of the radiator support that bump up to the back of the grill, and so you can use those as contact points as well. So we'll put a little bit of cement. We're going to actually use some, some CA glue here, a little super glue, to put this into position. And you can see you got to always remove the paint or chrome when you're going to glue parts together. So let's show you where those glue points are here, because that's kind of important. And you're going to want to make sure that you don't get too much glue in there, just enough to make sure that you get good adhesion. So I took a little bit of medium so that it didn't run. You know, the liquid stuff, the thin stuff, will run on you. You don't want that here. You want it to stay in place until you get your part into position. So we're going to add the glue to those little touch spots too on the radiator supports and just behind the bumper to give us a little bit more a stable location for that grill assembly. And it doesn't take just a little touch, and as long as you're on there, you're fine. And you'll see that we can put a little accelerator on there later on, just on the back side, but it slips right in there and it fits perfectly. It's kind of in a slot. You see it snap into position. So make sure that it's in place, and then you can push it backwards to make sure it's fully seated against those ridges on the sides. So then after we get this thing done, next we'll put the car into a position to add the roll pan and chin spoiler with the repainted version that we did after we reassembled it. And we're going to put a little glue right along the ridges of the lower fender there. It's got a tiny ridge where it's supposed to settle onto, but mostly you're going to have to make sure that you just guide it into position, make sure it's in the right place, and make sure that the edges of each surface, both those and the fender, fit together well. It kind of snaps into position there, as you see. And once you've got that into place with some CA glue, you'll want to add some accelerator to make sure that it stays put. This is going to be important for your wheel height and the chassis assembly to make sure you get a good place. Now we'll add the front bumper, and it's pretty thin and fragile, so be careful with it. The first thing we're going to do is scrape a little of that chrome off in the middle, and then we're going to add a little stripe of glue right down the middle, and it will mount onto the forward plate that's at the bottom of the chassis there. It just kind of is attached to that. You put it into place and it fits right into position. It's molded perfectly, so you go ahead and wiggle it, make sure it's in place, and then put some accelerator on it after you've got it in the right position. Now we'll add that license plate bracket, and that was constructed from just a little piece of sheet styrene and a little piece of square stock for the bracket mount, and we're going to put that into place right underneath the bumper there. So we've scratched off a little bit of paint there, and we're going to glue the license plate bracket into position. You notice it's still got a white tab, that's raw, so that it'll glue and stay. We're going to use some slow setting cement and put it right in the middle there so that we can glue it up into position, and if it needs to be adjusted, left or right, you can do that. So make sure that it's squarely in the middle, and you can use the ornament in the middle of the grill to line it up and make sure that it's aligned. Now we can move to the back end, and as you see there, we've got from the back end the license plate, backing plate, the spoiler, the roll pan, and the plate, and also the chrome bumper. Now we're going to put those into position. First, we're going to start with the roll pan there, which also has the place for the license plate, and it just kind of fits on there. There's not much ridge. So you're going to have to kind of make sure that the form fits the fenders, and then you just glue it to the edges, and use some good glue. You want to use some super glue, if not at first, then secondarily, to ensure that it stays in place. So once you've got that into position, make sure that if you have to manipulate it right away, you do, so that it fits and wraps around as if it were part of the fender, but it's really a separate piece. You can also see where the part was scraped off there in order to make a good contact for the license plate bracket and license plate. The next piece to install is the chrome bumper, and it's just about as thin as the originals were, so be careful you don't break it. But scrape off a little bit of plating on the edges, because it simply glues on those outside edges to an area just around the edge there that you can clean off and add some glue to. So put a little contact cement on there because it's a good fit, and once you get it into position, then you can go ahead and add some accelerant to make sure that it stays there. And that's one of the great things about CA glue, is you can make it instantly adhere parts together. It's kind of nice to have something like that, so go ahead and hold it into place, and then you can add a little accelerant when it starts to tack dry. If you feel that it's needed, you may be able to just leave it and it will dry by itself. So then we're going to add the spoiler, the rear spoiler, and that goes into those holes that we drilled with the boring tool, the dead center boring tool, and the stanchions just go right into place. And you can use a little glue on it or not. In this case, I like to take it off for when I'm transporting the model so that it doesn't get broken off. And so I usually just insert it into the holes where it goes, and then leave it there. Now we can work with the backing plate, which is kit supplied, like I mentioned, and that glues into position in that area that we had scratched off some of the paint on the back of the roll pan and the back plane there. So glue the license plate tag to the backing plate, and go ahead and then put that into position. Make sure, once again, it's centered with the gas cap, filler cap there, and it's square and straight. And then just press it into position and let it set. And you've got a nice looking back end all finished. Next, we'll move into some of the accessory items here, some of the final pieces. And as you can see, we've got the hood staged, but that goes in last, of course, because first we need to put some under-engine pieces in place. You see the air cleaner, the snorkel for the heat riser there, and the decals that go on that, as well as some chrome pieces. We've got both the hood pins and the door latches too. So we'll be putting those into place now, and then adding the hood to the end. The air cleaner gets a couple of nice looking decals, and so we're going to segregate those and cut off the numberings for them, because we don't want them to float onto the decal. And then just like anything else, you use some nice warm water, you get the decal off, and then we're going to use some setting solution to put it in place. So we'll start with that. Just a thin amount, actually a small amount is all that's necessary. So go ahead and add some of that to the spot where you're going to put the decal. Now, remember, it's a good idea to look at the internet pictures and see if you can figure from those the best location for special decals like the ones that go on the air cleaner, etc. And then that way you'll have a good idea of accurate and authentic placement. So we're going to get that into position here in just a moment, and then I'll show you what those are supposed to look like when you're done. From what I could see, they're kind of angled off towards that front left corner, but these may have all been rebuilds, so I'm not really positive if they're accurate, but that's what I determined from looking at pictures on the internet. Well, you might have noticed that those are not hood pins. Those are mirror surfaces. So we're going to use a tool borrowed from the nail art people and a little sticky stuff, and we're going to use it to grab a hold of the front side of one of our parts here, and then we're going to stick it into position in one of the mirror frames. So they work pretty handy like this. We've put a little bit of tube glue in there first, and so now we're going to add the mirror surface into position using our dedicated tool. And once we get it more or less positioned, we can manipulate it around and make sure it's in the right spot. Now we'll work on those door latches, and of course the body's been painted, but we're going to take some of the chrome plating off the back side because we're going to use some CA glue to put these into position, and we want a good adhesion, so we're going to get a nice clean surface and start to work with those. So here you see we're going to install the door latches, and these are just a chrome piece that fits into the little notch on the door. I used a little bit of contact cement or a CA cement there, and you just snap it into place. Make sure it is pushed all the way in. It actually seats because it has a wedge shape to it. So go ahead and make sure that that is in position, that it doesn't get crooked, that it's fitting right into the little shallow where it belongs. And then go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Now we've already test fit the air cleaner for hood fit, and it's just fine, including the small tabs we put on the air collector there. We're going to add a little slow setting tube glue here because it's sticky, but we don't want it to harden right away. The reason for that is we have to kind of slide this thing down around the exhaust manifold on the passenger side, and so we're going to put it into position, and once it's kind of tacky, we'll be able to just let it dangle there, and we'll add a little glue to the carburetor's post, and then we're going to just put this into position, and then after it has sit there, we'll manipulate it until it's in the right position and let it dry. We're down to our final details, including these decals. We got a few door keyhole buttons, and then the all-important Boss 351 script in the back plane here. So we add a little bit of that setting solution and put it into position. And once we've got that going, we are going to find that this single-purpose kit is nearly finished. So we're going to add a little bit of positioning here to make sure that that last decal is just right. It's so important to get this thing not only in the proper position but with the proper attitude. That is, it's not at an angle, it's not too close to one side or the other. So take your time, and then when it gets tack dry, put another little coat on it. And finally, we've got decals, yes, on the C-pillar windows, those little side windows in the back. They get a couple of decals on each side. So they will go into position on a little setting solution, and they pretty much will stay there without any more attention. The hard part is just finagling them to get them into the absolutely perfect position and relationship to each other. And here's what they're supposed to look like when you get these decals all done and into position. And you see all the nice looking trim around there, and the door decal for the keyhole has not yet been installed, but you'll put those into place at this time. Now, even though this is a single-purpose build, you'll have a few things left over in your kit. Of course, the complementary silver stripes and the gauge decals that we opted for the aftermarket parts for, but you'll also notice there's some pieces in here, and that portends a future release of some sort of fastback Mustang for the same year or maybe the next year's model. So we'll be able to look forward to that as well. Well, there you have it. Your model is complete. And I think that this sets a new benchmark for affordable, highly detailed kits that are easy to build, including an outstanding set of decals. I can't say enough good things, and I hope that Revell is listening, because I really enjoyed this kit. It is superb, and it has just the right features and things that make it a really outstanding looking kit. You could even take this further, with wiring and further detailing, and make this into an outstanding contest eligible kit. I would highly recommend that you buy one of these and show Revell that you can really appreciate the extra effort that they've done to make this available to the general public as a brand new tool and a new era in Revell kits. Well, we hope you like this comprehensive step-by-step model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the icon in the lower right of any of our reviews, or you can find us on Facebook or our website, rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.